Imagine this, a vault so secret, so impenetrable, that even world leaders are denied access, locked away for centuries. Hidden beneath the Vatican, ancient scrolls and forbidden manuscripts rest in silence, pages that could rewrite history. What if I told you that inside those walls are documents that could change everything we know about Jesus? What if his missing years, his true teachings, and even his descendants were erased from history? And here's the real question. Why would the Church fight so hard for centuries to keep these secrets buried? Tonight, we uncover a mystery that could shake the foundation of Christianity itself. Let's be real. The Vatican isn't just a religious institution. It's a fortress of knowledge, controlling what the world is allowed to know. Buried beneath its halls are over 85 kilometers of classified documents. Ancient texts, secret letters, lost gospels. Some say the truth about Jesus might just be sitting there right now, hidden from the world. But why? Throughout history, information has been controlled, altered, and even erased. Entire books were removed from the Bible. The Gospel of Thomas? Gone. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene? Hidden. And then there's the biggest mystery of all, Jesus' missing years. Where was he? What was he doing? Did he travel? Did he learn from other spiritual masters? And more importantly, why isn't this in the Bible? Today, we dig deep into one of the greatest religious mysteries of all time. History is written by the victors. But what if the version we've been told about Jesus isn't the full story? Think about it. The Bible tells us about Jesus' birth. Then, nothing. For nearly 18 years. Where did he go? What was he doing? Did he travel across continents, learning from other spiritual masters? And then there's the Bible itself. Who decided which books made it in, and which ones were erased? Why were the Gospels of Thomas and Mary Magdalene left out? What did they say that was so dangerous? And here's the biggest question. Could the Vatican be hiding records that tell a different version of Jesus' story? Tonight, we go beyond the surface and straight into the heart of the mystery. All right, let's talk about the Vatican's secret archives. This isn't just some old library. Nope, this is one of the most restricted collections of documents in the world. And here's where it gets really interesting. These archives contain over 85 kilometers of classified documents. That's longer than 900 football fields worth of ancient manuscripts, forbidden books, and secret letters. Some of these texts date back over 1,000 years. And guess what? Most of us will never be allowed inside. But why? What's in there that's so dangerous? Some researchers believe these archives contain original copies of ancient Gospels that were removed from the Bible. Others think they hold correspondence between early Christian leaders debating which stories about Jesus should be told and which should be buried. But the real bombshell? Some say the Vatican has records about Jesus' missing years, where he went, who he learned from, and what he really taught. And here's something even crazier. Did you know that the Vatican controls access to certain documents by restricting them for 75 years or longer? That means even historians and scholars don't get to read them. Now ask yourself, if there's nothing to hide, why keep these documents locked away for centuries? And if that's not enough to raise suspicion, consider this. In the 1940s, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, ancient Jewish texts that date back to the time of Jesus. These scrolls could give us a clearer picture of what was happening in Judea during Jesus' lifetime. But guess who controlled access to those documents for decades? That's right. A select group of scholars, many of whom had ties to the Vatican. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe there are things in those texts that don't fit the story we've been told. And then there's the Nag Hammadi Library, a collection of early Christian writings found in Egypt in 1945. These include Gospels that paint a radically different picture of Jesus, one where he teaches personal enlightenment rather than church doctrine. If these writings are just as old as the four Gospels in the Bible, why were they banned? Why was the Church so determined to erase them from history? And here's another question. What if there are even more ancient manuscripts sitting in the Vatican's archives? Documents that could prove Jesus' teachings were heavily influenced by Eastern philosophy, or that he traveled far beyond Judea and studied in places like Egypt, India, or even Tibet. Think about what that would mean. It would mean that Jesus' message wasn't just for one group of people, it was universal. And if that's the case, then why has the Church spent centuries trying to control that message? Now let's talk about something that almost no one knows about. Did you know that the Vatican has a secret library beneath St. Peter's Basilica? Some believe it holds books and records so controversial that revealing them could cause a crisis of faith. One of the most intriguing theories? Hidden deep in these archives, there are documents suggesting that Jesus had a family, that he may have had children. And if that's true, that changes everything. Because if Jesus had a bloodline, then suddenly the entire structure of the Church, the idea of apostolic succession, papal authority, the role of the clergy, all of it could be called into question. No wonder they would want to keep these secrets locked away. So here's my question to you. What do you think is hidden in the Vatican archives? Could they be sitting on evidence that could change Christianity forever? And if they are, will we ever get to see it? One thing's for sure, history is full of secrets, but eventually, the truth always finds a way out. And let's not forget, this isn't just about faith. This is about history, about our right to know the full story. Imagine if ancient Roman records still existed, documenting Jesus' trial before Pontius Pilate, or if first-hand accounts from people who met Jesus were still locked away. Wouldn't you want to read them? And wouldn't it be strange if those records existed, but you weren't allowed to see them? The Vatican holds immense power, not just spiritually, but historically. And when it comes to the greatest religious figure in history, shouldn't we have access to all the facts? Maybe, just maybe, the Vatican is afraid of what those facts might reveal. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest mysteries in Christianity, the missing years of Jesus. Think about it. The Bible gives us details about Jesus' birth. It tells us about him at age 12, astonishing the elders in the temple with his wisdom. And then, silence, for nearly 18 years. Where was he? What was he doing? How does someone go from an unknown carpenter's son to the most influential religious figure in human history? And here's the thing, this isn't just some small gap. This is over half of Jesus' life that we know nothing about. So let's ask the big question. Did Jesus travel? Some ancient texts and oral traditions suggest that Jesus may have left Judea during these missing years, that he might have traveled far beyond what we've been told. Some researchers believe he went to Egypt, study with the mystical Essenes. Others say he traveled to India, learning from Hindu and Buddhist monks. And some even claim he reached Tibet, where his teachings parallel Buddhist philosophy. Sound crazy? Maybe. But here's where it gets interesting. There's an ancient Buddhist manuscript found in Tibet that speaks of a man named Isa, a Western teacher who arrived from the Middle East. His teachings were remarkably similar to those of Jesus. And here's the kicker. This manuscript was discovered in the late 1800s by a Russian explorer named Nicholas Notovich. He claimed the text described a man who preached love, peace, and compassion before returning to his homeland. Now I know what you're thinking. Could Isa really be Jesus? Well, let's look at what we do know. Many of Jesus' teachings, his emphasis on kindness, humility, detachment from material wealth, and inner peace, align closely with Buddhist and Hindu philosophy. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe. Jesus' message was shaped by wisdom from the East, a message that was later rewritten to fit a different narrative. And here's something even more bizarre. Did you know that ancient Indian and Persian texts mention a prophet from the West who studied among them? If true, that would mean Jesus' wisdom came from more than just Judea. It would mean his message was universal. But let's take it even further. If Jesus spent time in Egypt, India, or Tibet, why isn't it in the Bible? Maybe because including it would change the way people viewed Christianity. If Jesus had learned from Buddhist monks or Hindu sages, then suddenly Christianity wouldn't seem like an entirely new revelation, but rather a continuation of older spiritual traditions. And that could challenge everything the Church has built its authority on. But wait, there's more. Did you know that some ancient Jewish sects, like the Essenes, had teachings shockingly similar to what Jesus later preached? They believed in strict spiritual discipline. They emphasized purification, fasting, and living humbly. They rejected the corruption of religious institutions. Sound familiar? Some historians believe Jesus may have spent years studying with the Essenes in Egypt or near the Dead Sea. And if that's true, then his teachings weren't just a divine revelation. They were a blend of deep spiritual traditions from across the ancient world. And here's where things get even more mysterious. If the Vatican had documents that confirmed this, would they share it? Would they reveal that Jesus may have been influenced by ideas that existed long before Christianity? Or would they keep it hidden? Here's what we know. The Church has spent centuries controlling the narrative of Jesus' life. So if new evidence came to light, evidence that suggested Jesus traveled, studied abroad, and learned from non-Jewish traditions, it could shake the very foundation of Christianity. So let me ask you this. What if Jesus' missing years weren't missing at all? What if the answers have been there all along, just hidden in plain sight? And if we could rewrite history, would we see Jesus not just as the Son of God, but as a seeker of wisdom across many faiths? One thing is certain. The truth has a way of finding its way back, and maybe, just maybe, we're getting closer to it. And here's one last thought to leave you with. If Jesus did travel and learn from other spiritual masters, wouldn't that make his message even more powerful? Not just as a religious doctrine, but as a universal truth? Imagine a world where people understood that all great faiths share the same core values. That wisdom isn't confined to one group, one religion, or one time period. Maybe that's the real secret. Not that Jesus was just a divine being, but that he was a teacher who sought truth across cultures and who understood that love, peace, and enlightenment belonged to everyone. But if that's true, then why was it erased? And more importantly, will we ever be allowed to know? All right, let's talk about one of the most controversial moments in Christian history, the Council of Nicaea. This wasn't just a religious meeting. It was a turning point that shaped Christianity as we know it today. So here's the big question. Was Christianity carefully shaped, or was it manipulated? Let's go back to the year 325 AD. Rome was in chaos. The empire was divided. And Emperor Constantine, yes, a Roman emperor, not a religious leader, decided that Christianity needed to be unified. Why? Because he saw Christianity as a way to strengthen his empire, control the people, and bring order. And that's where the Council of Nicaea comes in. Constantine gathered 318 bishops and ordered them to settle major disputes about Jesus, his divinity, and what Christians should believe. Now here's where things get interesting. Up until this point, there were many different beliefs about Jesus. Some saw him as a great prophet, others as a divine being. And some early Christians even believed that Jesus was just a man chosen by God, but not God himself. So what did Constantine do? He wanted one clear version of Christianity, one doctrine, one story, one Jesus. And so, at the Council of Nicaea, major decisions were made that would change Christianity forever. The doctrine of the Trinity was officially established. Before this, many Christians debated whether Jesus was equal to God or separate from him. At Nicaea, it was declared that Jesus was fully divine, fully human, and one with God. Certain Gospels were chosen, and others were banned. The 4 Gospels we have today, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were approved. But dozens of other writings, including the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, and the Gospel of Mary, were rejected. Any Christian group that disagreed, they were labeled as heretics. And here's where things get really suspicious. These banned Gospels weren't just forgotten, they were hunted down and destroyed. Many of them contain stories of Jesus that were, let's just say, very different from what we read today. Take the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. This text suggests that Mary wasn't just a follower of Jesus, she was his closest disciple. In fact, some passages imply that Jesus shared knowledge with her that he didn't even tell the male disciples. Now, imagine what that would mean. If Mary Magdalene had been seen as Jesus' true successor, the entire power structure of the church could have been different. And let's not forget the Gospel of Judas. It tells a shocking story where Judas wasn't a traitor, but actually Jesus' most trusted disciple. According to this gospel, Jesus asked Judas to betray him as part of a divine plan. That's a very different version of events than what we're told in the Bible, right? So here's the big question. Was the story of Jesus shaped for spiritual reasons or for political power? Because let's be honest, if Constantine just wanted religious clarity, why would he be involved at all? Why would a Roman emperor, who wasn't even baptized at the time, be the one making decisions about Christian doctrine? The answer? Power. By controlling the story of Jesus, Constantine could unite his empire under one religion. And by creating an official version of Christianity, he made sure the church would have control over what people believed. And once that version was set, alternative gospels were banned. Anyone who believed differently was labeled a heretic. The church gained more authority over people's spiritual lives than ever before. And here's the thing, this wasn't just a one-time event. As the centuries went on, the church continued to suppress knowledge, remove texts, and rewrite history. And that leads us to another disturbing question. If the Vatican has documents from Nicaea, original manuscripts of the banned Gospels, or even records of what was debated in that council, why haven't they been made public? Could it be that the real story of Jesus, the one that existed before 325 AD, was something completely different? Now, think about what that means. If different Christian groups had been allowed to keep their beliefs, if all of Jesus' teachings had been preserved instead of edited, would Christianity look completely different today? Maybe. And maybe that's exactly why certain documents remain locked away in the Vatican. So here's my question to you. If you had the chance to read the real, unfiltered history of Jesus, would you want to see it? And if that truth was different from what we've been taught, would you be ready for it? One thing is for sure, history is written by those in power, but the truth always finds a way out. All right, let's take a step back and ask the big question. What if everything we've talked about tonight is true? What if the Vatican is hiding secret documents? What if Jesus' missing years did take him to places we never imagined? What if the Council of Nicaea really did shape Christianity, not for faith, but for power? Think about the impact that would have. For centuries, billions of people have followed a version of Jesus' story that was carefully crafted, edited, and controlled. But if we found undeniable proof that the original story was different, how would the world react? Some people would embrace the truth. They'd see Jesus as a seeker of wisdom, someone who absorbed teachings from around the world, a universal teacher, not just for one faith, but for all humanity. But others? They might reject it. Because let's be real, when someone's entire life, entire belief system is built on a specific version of faith, changing that narrative can feel terrifying. But history tells us one thing. Truth always rises to the surface. Take the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example. When they were first discovered, there was fear that their contents might contradict the Bible. So what happened? They were kept hidden from the public for decades. Same with the Nag Hammadi library. Texts that showed alternative versions of Jesus' teachings were labeled as heretical. So let's ask this. If these texts were just harmless old books, why were they buried, locked away, or even burned? Because controlling knowledge means controlling power. And here's where it gets even bigger. What happens if one day those Vatican archives are fully opened? What if the Church finally admits that early Christianity was more diverse than we were told? What if they confirm that Jesus' teachings had influences from Eastern philosophy? What if they reveal evidence that certain Gospels were deliberately removed to shape a more controlled religion? Would people still believe? Or would it cause the greatest religious crisis in history? Now, I know this is a lot to take in, but here's the thing. Every time we uncover a new piece of hidden history, we get closer to the truth. And if the Vatican has been guarding this knowledge for centuries, then maybe, just maybe, it's time to start asking the hard questions. Because if the truth about Jesus is different from what we've been told, shouldn't we want to know? And here's one final thought to leave you with. Throughout history, people have fought to suppress information that challenges the status quo. Galileo was persecuted for saying the earth revolved around the sun. Ancient libraries, filled with knowledge, were burned to the ground to erase inconvenient truths. So why should we believe that religious history is any different? Maybe the real lesson here isn't just about what's hidden in the Vatican. Maybe it's about our willingness to seek the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Because at the end of the day, the most powerful thing we can do is ask questions. And the biggest question of all, what else have we not been told? So here we are. After everything we've uncovered tonight, one question remains. What do we do with this information? Because if the Vatican does hold documents that tell a different story about Jesus, if history has been edited, rewritten, and controlled for centuries, then we have to ask ourselves, why? And more importantly, what else is out there that we haven't been told? Here's what we know. The Council of Nicaea shaped the version of Christianity we know today. Ancient texts, some as old as the Gospels in the Bible, were banned and destroyed. The Vatican has archives so secret that even world leaders aren't allowed inside. Now, if there was nothing controversial in those archives, why keep them locked away? Why not let the world see them? Maybe, just maybe, because what's inside could change everything. But here's the real question. Would people even want to know the truth? Because let's be honest, when faced with information that challenges everything we've believed, it's easier to look away. It's easier to ignore the questions than to face the possibility that history isn't what we thought. But truth doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. And history has shown us that secrets don't stay buried forever. So the question isn't if the truth will come out, it's when. And when it does, how will the world react? Some will embrace it, others will fight against it. But one thing is certain, it will change the way we see history, faith, and even ourselves. Because if history has been shaped by those in power, then maybe, just maybe, it's time for the U.S. to take back the truth. And that starts with asking questions. Because the truth is always worth searching for.